They're like, this was such a big part of my childhood. But then they're also saying, but it was so bad, he wanted to get rid of it.
The internet plays a huge role in a lot of this.
I remember remembering it a certain way, but I don't remember the title of it.
But just because somebody tells you something, and they even cry when they tell you, it doesn't mean it actually happened.
So I'm aware that there are mechanisms that people have to not remember things correctly.
So how good is your memory? If asked about an event that happened in your past, would you be able to describe it down to the fine details? And then after you described it so well, what if you're told that that event never even existed? For this story, I decided to call on my childhood friends.
What's up, man?
Do you remember back in the 90s, there was a movie about a genie? It was an African-American genie. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Who played the genie?
Was it Sinbad?
Who was the actor?
I remember Shaq, but like it's actually Sinbad, isn't it? Or no?
Do you remember one with Sinbad?
Oh, yeah, I do. It's Sinbad. What was it called?
So for the longest time, I've had this memory of Sinbad playing in a movie as a genie in the 90s. And I'm not the only one that has had this thought. In fact, there were thousands around the world that have had this exact same memory. But the issue is that with a simple Google search, the movie's nowhere to be found. So I took it one step further and went to one of LA's final movie rental stores to search for the 90s film Shazaam.
Too many to count. We do have a very wide selection of VHSs here. My coworker probably had somebody come in here and asking for it.
After searching hundreds of titles, just like my Google search, the film was nowhere to be found. So I took it one step further. As Sinbad continues to recover from a stroke, I asked his kids directly, was this movie ever made?
So Shazaam, starring Sinbad, our dad, was not real.
It was not.
Didn't happen.
Did not happen.
Get over it.
Get over it.
The main one I've heard is that he's a genie, and there are these kids. They've lost some type of parent. It's mainly been the mom,
It's
but
always the mom.
The mom. Sometimes
the
people
mom.
say it's the dad, but
Yeah.
they've lost a parent.
Yeah.
And apparently, he, as the genie, helps them cope through it.
Because that's what genies do.
And that is the storyline across many threads and blog posts, that Sinbad's genie character was helping a couple of kids cope through a tragic time. This is called the Mandela Effect.
And it's a belief that specific details from the past are being altered or changed.
Sinbad and Shazaam is just one example of dozens.
The most famous one is the children's book, The Berenstein Bears. This title of this children's book, The Berenstein Bears, this book I did read a bunch when I was a kid. So I had an idea about how it was spelled. And so I just had this kind of unconscious feeling of how it was spelled. And in this case, there was just a one-letter change from Berenstein, S-T-E-I-N, to Berenstein, S-T-A-I-N.
The easy answer is just that you may have overlooked it your entire life.
Then that could definitely very well be true. But there's another aspect of it that for me, for instance, and I think other people, when you see the A instead of the E, there's kind of like a feeling of like, that doesn't look right. Match it with the memories of me for looking at this book so many times and growing up with it. There's like this kind of dissonance, cognitive dissonance.
Another example of this effect is, of course, the name itself, named after Nelson Mandela. Some strongly remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 90s instead of 2013. Now, this example can be proven, but one thing that is impossible to prove is the memory itself.
You can't disprove a person having the memory of it being the other way. You know what I mean? So for a person who has this memory that this thing is wrong, even if you show them that, look, it's this other way, for them, if the memory is not like that, it's not going to prove it to them. You know, they're gonna say, okay, I see what you're saying, but it feels totally wrong and it makes you feel kind of crazy to look at that A in the name.
Dr. French says most of these theories are not so much about proving or disproving, it's more about how we're experiencing the world. So for the most part, these theories are harmless. But what happens when it's something much more tragic in our lives?
We have a lot of little false memories floating around in our memory bank, and we're probably not even aware of it, and it doesn't even matter very much. But when it comes to some of these legal cases and its freedom is at stake, then these small differences and small memory mistakes matter very, very much.
Tragic events or not, it's hard remembering details to certain events. This is why questioning or being exposed to information or misinformation that could cause a distorted mind. Here's an example.
Did you ever see a movie with a genie? It was an African American genie.
Oh, is it Shaq? With Shaq?
Yes, Michael was right. Shaq did play a genie in a film called Shazaam. But when I asked him differently, this is how he responded.
Do you remember one with Sinbad?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. It's Sinbad. What was it called?
It's quite easy to take somebody who's seen an accident and convince them that the car went through a stop sign when it was a yield sign, or that a simulated crime where the bad guy, had straight hair, but you convinced people it was curly hair. Changing somebody's memory for the details is pretty easy to do.
So why should you care? Well, we are all susceptible to this.
These studies are done with ordinary, normal, healthy, adults or even children. When it comes to young children, they're even more susceptible to these kinds of manipulations of their memory.
For me, it's important to pay attention to this and to talk about it, because I think there is a kind of cognitive or even a sort of paradigm shift in terms of memory related to how technology changes, as I just said, changes the way we think, changes the way we experience the world, changes our perception. I would even go that far.
I think just as a whole in general, right, we are seeing, even applying it to in this day and age, right? You can give people factual information, you can have truth staring them in the face, and they'll be like,
But really though?
but I don't know.
It wasn't Sinbad?
No, it wasn't Sinbad.
I don't know. I just feel like I've seen that movie. It's Sinbad. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that movie never existed. There was no movie with Sinbad ever in it.
I mean, I'm still going to Google it.
That just because somebody tells you something and they describe it in a lot of detail and they say they're confident, I'm 90% sure, and they even cry when they tell you, it doesn't mean it actually happened. You need independent corroboration to know if you're dealing with an authentic memory or one that's a product of some other process, imagination, suggestion, inferences, or some other process.
Hey everyone, Cody Broadway here. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out the NBCLX YouTube channel. Be sure to click here for more videos, and also click here to subscribe to join the NBCLX community.